today would have been the 27th birthday of Breonna Taylor, who was killed back in March in Louisville, Kentucky during a no-knock police raid. And that is her death is one of the incidents that has added fuel to this fire with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and all of the kind of the conflict that we're seeing in the country right now. And one of the good things to come out of this whole thing is we are seeing prosecutions. I saw something on the news this morning. There's something in, I think, the Louisville legislature about no-knock raids and police cameras and all that stuff, because of course the cameras weren't on during that raid and all that other stuff. So there is action being taken on a legislative level as well as, in the streets, which is what we need to affect change. And all this is sort of on my mind last night when I was watching Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, which came out in 1989. And I've seen this movie probably a dozen times in my life. And it's one of those films that I come back to every few years, and it always affects me differently. The last time I watched it about a decade ago, I thought it was just kind of silly, and it wasn't quite on Spike Lee's wavelength with the way he structured everything. Which is a weird sensation. I think it was just whatever mood I was in at that time, because I'd never felt that way. And I didn't feel that way last night, probably because I was watching it in the context of, these George Floyd protests. Right. Specifically the circumstances surrounding his death. For those who might not be familiar, Do the Right Thing takes place in Bed-Stuy in 1989 on the hottest day of the year. Predominantly a black neighborhood. There's racial tensions with the residents and a Italian-American family who owns a pizza place that's been there for 25 years, a Korean grocer who's been there for about a year. Things escalate and flare up. Tensions rise. There is a strangulation at the hands of local police that leads to... it's not a riot. It's, basically Sal's Pizza, gets broken into and, burned to the ground, essentially. Yes. And in the context of Spike Lee's film, that's where it stops. There's no indication that it spreads. Things kind of simmered down over that night. But the other parallels to what are happening today are unmistakable. So one of the reasons we're talking about this movie is because Spike Lee's latest film is coming out later this week. So I thought it'd be cool to look at the film that really put him on the map. I know he'd made a couple other features before this, but I wanted to talk to you guys about your experiences of watching Do the Right Thing. When did you first see it? How did it affect you? What do you think of it as a film? And also, what do you think of it in the context of what we're going through today? So I'm done monologuing. I want to open up the floor to, let's start with EMan. How did you first engage with Do the Right Thing? Oh, your audio's off. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, the funny thing was that I had always seen this movie in bits and pieces, and I never saw it in full completion. I knew what it was about. I knew the ending and all that, but I never sat down and just watched it. And, last night was the first time that I actually sat down and watched it in completion from beginning to end. And, the experience was hard to quantify because, it's one thing to engage something as a film critic, and then it's another thing to engage it when the subject matter is so close to home, and I think my impression of the film was, it's scary how relevant this movie is. It's daunting how many times I've seen that similar story played out in different ways. I guess just looking at it from more of a film perspective, I loved how complex the characters were. Nobody was really all that good, and no one was, all that bad. I mean, for some people, yes, they had. I mean, everyone had their perspective, and I really appreciated that with Spike's film, just because life isn't always just good guys, bad guys. It's not always that clear. Sal was a complicated character.
Yeah.
There were reasons where this guy, you would kind of think like, oh, he's just some racist old guy with oh, well, actually, he has a heart too, or just his complicated, or Mookie, for example, like one of the looming questions I kept asking myself was, did Mookie actually do the right thing? With his decision to pick up the garbage can and everything. And I mean, it was just such an emotionally charged, complicated series of events and characters being represented that I appreciated it for that. The fact that it's not telling a black and white story, no pun intended, but the fact that it is telling a human story and that it's giving you something to digest. Like I was really sitting here thinking to myself, like, just how certain characters, how they would, I guess, play out today. You know, would the radio Raheem be blamed, for his death because of the radio? You know, um, would he inspire other places or cities and stuff to riot as well? Um, I was trying to see, where do I fit myself into some of these characters? Am I a Mookie? Am I a Radio Raheem? Am I, the guy that's like complaining about the pictures on the wall? Like,
bugging out.
yeah, like, where do I fit? And the thing is that, just as a black person, like, I felt and understood every single person. I didn't have to agree with them, but I knew where everybody was coming from. And I was trying to pinpoint and just kind of figure out, like, okay, it's awkward because with movies, you can only do so much, right? I mean, I was sitting here thinking to myself, like, when you get to the point after the big altercation at the end, and then it almost seems to just jump right into riot mode. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, is this fair? Is it a fair portrayal? And I think to a certain extent it was, but I don't know if it was captured enough if you were just like a random person walking into this movie and you had, let's just say, no context of like the black experience in America. I don't know if it captured that, because I could easily see someone watching this and be like, they didn't have to burn all this stuff down. They didn't have to go to this point. But I think someone like Spike Lee kind of takes liberties in assuming that, and he kind of lays this out like in the little dialogue that the characters have. He kind of lays it out like, man, you guys have always been doing this. Man, the police have always been this. And man, you did all of it. And it was like, he was kind of trying to slip in the fact that this has been a consistent historical issue.
Yeah.
I got that because I know it. I understand it. I live it in a lot of cases. But for a film, it's hard to say whether or not other people will get that don't have that experience. So, I mean, I'm not going to comment on that because that's not, that's a little out of my peer view.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say because there's a lot of emotions that are also being processed while watching things like this. I think that we've gotten to this point where, back in the early 2000s, we used to talk about, the Hostels and the Saw movies and like the torture porn, right? And I think we've gotten to the point where we've become almost numb sometimes to the murder porn of black bodies. We see these things so often, we don't even flinch at the fact that there are long, prolonged periods of time where we're just looking at a black body on the ground, just dead. And that kind of caught me too when we kept seeing the shots of Radio Raheem just on the ground or just in the police car. And I'm just sitting here like kind of turning away, like, God, man, like, can you cut to the next scene? Because stuff like that is traumatizing.
Yeah.
Because I see myself as him. I'm a big black guy. Like I see myself as him in those type of situations. So it's I know I'm saying a lot of words, but it's kind of hard to really articulate the actual feeling and the because it does feel traumatizing, but it's hard to process it because I don't think we're used to processing it. I think we're used to reacting to it. So I'll leave it at that for now. I don't want to, hog up too much time, but like that's just my initial impression with the full sit through of this film.
Yeah.
No, that's totally fair. And you bring up something that's very interesting, which is the fact that you're seeing this movie in its entirety for the first time in the aftermath of or actually in the middle of what's going on right now in the country. And you have this perception that they're showing too much of this, Radio Raheem, this young dead black man. A lot of that, I think, is due to the advent of social media in the last, decade plus. 30 years ago, it didn't strike me as excessive when Spike Lee chose to focus on Bill Nunn's, very very well performed lifeless corpse. I mean, it's a little bit eerie. I don't think it was excessive. I think it was just the right amount. But I can understand with the number of casualties that we've been inundated with on our news, it just seems like it's wallpaper. And it's very traumatizing.
Now it does, yeah.
Now, and so this is a kind of movie that, for someone who's seen it over 30 years, multiple times, it changes all the time in terms of its impact. But I can imagine someone, I think this is the perfect movie for today, but it almost needs a trigger warning. Like, you're going to watch this and be like, what the hell is going on? This is almost like a weird predictive film in a lot of ways. Not even just for, what's going on right now, but this was 3 years before the Rodney King riots, which, it had been a while since they'd had like widespread conflagrations, between, in 1989 and then the last one that happened before that. Now it's unfortunately more common. But I totally get where you're coming from. David, what about you? What's your take on Do the Right Thing, or your experience with it?
Well, kind of like EMan. I mean, in '89, I was, finishing up. I was a junior in high school, and I was living in Southern California, and so I had seen bits and parts of it. I knew about it. It was pretty sure it was nominated for Best Picture, so I was like aware of it because I was paying attention to that stuff. But I don't know why I never got around to seeing it in its full. But last year when it hit 30 years, I was like, I gotta, come on, I gotta see this. It's like, so I bought the Blu-ray, watched it, and I watched it again today. Finished it like 15 minutes before I hopped on here. When I watched it last year, I was like, wow, this is, as far as like characters and as far as like screenplay, cinematography, costume design by Ruth Carter. This is tight, it's economical storytelling. And it's, watching again today, I knew that it was going to touch a nerve because of the climate right now, but I was thinking to myself, I'm like, has there ever been any attempts to make this into a play? Because it comes across like a play, like the set and everything, and the way the camera moves. The jazz score by Terrence Blanchard, and I forget who else is the composer, but it's just like it really plays like a fable. And I could see, in my mind, like the stage design, like over here now and then you'd have the Greek chorus, Samuel Jackson as the DJ, and kind of chiming in now and then. I'm surprised. I'm sure it's been tried before, but that the characters here are so, they just feel so authentic and colorful. Everybody, the Italians, everybody. And there's a little bit of a stereotypical feel to it. Mainly, maybe because we've seen so many Italian Americans portrayed like this, so many African Americans were portrayed like this, but that's okay. It, I think it's driving home a point there too. I feel like, unfortunately, it's a dated movie, which I kind of like. The whole Air Jordans thing and everything, and there's so many things. Even Mr. Trump is mentioned in this movie. It's dated, but it's also unfortunately timeless. And I think it's. There's a reason Criterion picked this up, and I think it's it belongs in this like kind of classic time capsule. I think everybody should see it. I think it's probably Spike's most accessible film, because it's got so many different types of characters, and because it's just a slice of life, street level feel. The whole character of hot summer day, is like a character in the movie. Even the colors used. You got the three dudes sitting on a red hot brick wall against a red hot brick wall, like bright red. Just the lighting and everything in the interior apartments just feels just hot and sticky. What was it? It reminded me of like in Chicago here. It was like, what was it, the summer of '93 or '94? It's like, woo. And it's just, you feel the fans, you feel the sweat. And I think that it reminded me is like, it's a hot day. They keep on talking about hot heat, and that's an environment where attitudes and long-standing perspectives, let's say, boil up. And it was the movie is kind of like a kettle that's just kind of starting to, at the end where the riots happen, that the kettle's whistling, man. It's just it's just boiling up. But I think Spike does a really good job at just there's kind of a fairness here and there of who these characters are. I mean, Sal, played by Danny Aiello. I mean, he's the fact that he's been there for 25 years. He's fed he's watched these kids grow up. He's fed these people, on his street, on his on the neighborhood. He may not live in that neighborhood, but it's his. He feels like it's his street too, because he's fed these guys. He's watched them grow up, and he is kind of considers himself a nice guy. But the thing is he felt disrespected. And it's when I watched it again tonight, there's that scene on the front step with Ozzie Davis, and the young black guys are getting in his face. He's the old black guy who's called the mayor, and he always seems like drunk and everything. But even the young black guys look at him with a certain stereotype, and they're in his face. And he's talking about, you guys are being disrespectful. And it made me think, it's like, here are two older guys, Sal, the pizzeria owner, and here's the mayor on the street. Older guys, what they want is respect. They want to be included. They want to be a part of the neighborhood, part of the community. But, I didn't catch necessarily on that before tonight. And that's how it is when you watch a movie. It's like certain things just pop up. But I found that interesting how, and that's what I mean by this fairness. It's like, this older black man was feeling disrespected because he was looked at a certain way, because nobody was really understanding the type of pain and hardship he went through in his life. Nobody really cared. And at the same thing, nobody probably even gave it a second thought of what Sal's life was like. You know, it's just like they want to come in and get a slice of pizza. Extra cheese is $2. You know, it's like, it's just whatever. You know, I don't care about you. Just give me my pizza. It's like, I don't know. It just made me think about how you live with the people in your community, and a lot of times you just don't realize what they've gone through in life, you know. And it's just, you just kind of either take them for granted or you just don't care, you know. And that's what it's kind of made me think about.
Yeah, I mean, there is that respect, that dignity aspect to it, and also kind of a generational thing. Because earlier in the film, when they're opening up the pizzeria, and there's that whole running gag of Sal trying to get his two sons to sweep up front, and neither of them wants to do it, and then DeMea comes over and Sal offers him $1 to sweep up, and he didn't have to do that. He could have just kicked him out, kind of like everyone's telling Smiley to go away throughout the film. But he does, and it's a sign of these two older guys who feel like they've got a lot to give to their community and to each other, that level of respect. But it doesn't quite trickle down in the best way to the younger generation, because even Sal is dealing with disrespect with his own sons, who feel obligated to him because they're, he's their dad, and it's the family business and everything. But especially with the way the movie ends, with Sal having this massive blow up, and finally not necessarily revealing that he's like a hardcore racist, but he does harbor sentiments that he has been suppressing, because throughout the movie he's been cool as a cucumber. He's been trying to talk his hot-headed son, played by John Turturro, down from all the horrible things that he's talking about. Sal just boils over in this confrontation. So in that moment, that's something I picked up on for the first time. I kept wondering, Vito, who's the younger brother, he seems to be cool with everybody, and he's best friends with Mookie. It's Pino, the older brother, who is constantly worried about what his Italian friends think. He doesn't like black people. He's calling them every name in the book, and some in Italian. But I'm like, where is this coming from? And ultimately, in a way, it's coming from his father, even though and the culture that his father is allowing him to be raised in. And kind of the same thing with DeMea, is he's got all of this, sensibility and generational wisdom, and he's disappointed in the kids he sees running around the streets today. But what has he done to be a role model to them, or to try and model behavior? He hasn't, and for whatever personal reasons. And it's not necessarily that he has a responsibility to anybody that's not him or his immediate family, but when it's like, I can't believe all these kids just running around, without jobs and hassling people and getting into trouble. Well, like, what are you doing? You're just haggling over a Miller Lite. That kind of a thing. So yeah, there's definitely some great ideas at play here, and conflicts. The running thing with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King is great, down to the literal symbols of love and hate, the dueling quotes that close out the film, rather powerfully. The idea that it does end on an ambiguous note, like Sal and Mookie have that confrontation after the place is burned down the next morning, that they get into this fight, but then at the end, they're both like, Mookie's like, yeah, I got to go see my son. And then Sal's like, yeah, it's going to be hot today. And then it's just over.
Yeah, that's the part that really made me, again, it kind of reconfirmed how, that's something that, like, the way a play would end, right?
Yeah, right.
And then the lights fade. So I don't know. Maybe they tried doing it at some point, but I think it would be perfect to do a play like this. But, yeah, I mean, this is it's interesting to just see this, in context, but also just picking up. I think you could. No wonder you've watched it so many times. I think you could pick up on so many different things. I thought it was funny, just to see that this is the film debut of Rosie Perez and Martin Lawrence. And you could see in this movie like how much of a, like, at least watching it now, like how much of a fan of cinema Spike Lee is. Like, he opens up the movie with the of course the opening credit dance sequence with Rosie Perez, which is kind of like paying homage to Anne Margaret's scene in Bye Bye Birdie. That's how that movie opens. And then the whole love and hate thing, that's Robert Mitchum from Night of the Hunter. You know, all that, it's like an updated version of it. So you could tell like he's a fan of cinema. You could tell with the way Ernest Dickerson shoots the movie with Spike Lee, like there's a lot of, you know, slanted angles, kind of cameras positioned low at times. There's a lot of, there's not necessarily any, there's some straightforward shots, but it's mostly like angled and kind of it's having you kind of look at things, you know, in a tilted way. So it almost made me think of like, you know, Hitchcock or something like that. The street scenes, just the whole street feel, it reminded me of like a Will Eisner comic book or something. You know, like just the way like he used to write about, you know, Jewish and Polish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods in New York. But you know, I think it is hard to see what happens to Radio Raheem. But I think that it's really, yeah, it's the only death in the movie. But if you're gonna drive home a statement, and that was really, it's really potent. And I'm pretty sure it's based on what happened at Howard Beach a couple years before then. I think that was with Michael Stewart. And so he's, you know, Spike Lee's drawing on actual events. I'm sure he's drawing on characters he knew or he knows. It is interesting for him to actually, you know, choose to be in the movie too. You know, obviously early on he was in a lot of his movies, but you know, I'm wondering if he always felt. I haven't read any, you know, watched the movie with any comment or anything, but I'm wondering if he always saw if he ever saw anybody else as Mookie or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it'd be weird to think of anybody else as Mookie because he seems uniquely suited to doing that part.
Right.
Eman, I want to ask you something.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this. How authentic did the characters feel in terms, like the black characters, as far as their dialogue, their interactions? Did they feel authentic to you? And I'm not saying that you were around Bed-Stuy in 1989 and
you're an expert,
right? But just because what I'm getting at is that even, you know, Spike Lee was writing these characters, these specifically the Italian characters, this Italian family. They felt like, yeah, they're an Italian family. You're going to expect certain things, but in the way they talked to each other, interacted with each other, it felt almost like a universal language with some Italian thrown in. And I just wondered, like, there's a lot made, especially today, of if you have a movie that's about black people with a black cast, you got to have like a black writer director behind it, because they're the only ones who can understand the authentic, you know, voice and things like that. I'm not arguing that. I'm just trying to point out that, you know, 30 years ago, Spike Lee wrote characters that he was ostensibly not related to, but felt very relatable to someone who, you know, is, you know, partially Italian, if I could say so. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, did that authenticity that I was picking up on from the quote unquote the white characters, did that translate to the black characters for you?
You know, and that's a really interesting point, because that is something that tends to bother me, because it stands out so quickly when you see characters like a black character. They're supposed to be from New York or Chicago, and they speak like they're from Connecticut. or they have dialogue that doesn't sound very inner city Chicagoan, so to speak. And it's kind of like, clearly, I don't even need to look at the credits. I knew there was a white writer that thinks this is how black people talk, and we're gonna try and pass this over as being authentic. Um, I I think for this movie, one of the reasons why it didn't stand out to me or bother me was because everyone felt like a caricature of XYZ ethnic stereotype. From the Korean, store owners to all the black folks like in, a New York setting to the Italians in that setting. Everyone felt like they were just or even the Hispanic, I don't know if they were Puerto Rican or Dominican, but whatever the Hispanic representation in the film, everyone felt like that little over exaggeration of XYZ ethnic group. And I thought that, because just watching Spike's filmography, he does do things very intentionally, without trying to be, over the, I don't want to say over the top, but like he's not trying to go over your head. He's trying to put it in your face, and that's the difference. Like he wants you to see this Asian stereotype, so there is no confusion. He's not trying to be overly sophisticated with it. I thought that montage of or the sequence of the racial slurs, that to me was kind of like, okay, I can't take these characters as authentic face value because you're trying to tell me something else. You're trying to portray every Asian owner that people think of stereotypically across the country. You're trying to portray every Italian person in a small shop across the country. So yeah, the authenticity, especially with the black people, I didn't really take it one way or another because I thought the fact that he was doing that with all the different races in this, I thought it was just fair game.
Well, it was. I mean, there is some differentiation there, I think, because we don't spend an equal amount of time with all of these ethnic stereotypes, like with the Puerto Ricans and with the Koreans. A lot of it is we pretty much spend as much time with them as the predominantly black and Italian cast, which is these are just people in the neighborhood we kind of keep to our own. We're not going over and trying to make friends with the Korean store owners because perhaps we've got our own prejudices against them for whatever reasons. The Puerto Ricans are, pretty much isolated to their own stoop. I don't even know if that was like the beginning of a separate block that people just didn't kind of go into. But the characters that we do get to spend time with, like Mookie and his sister, like Sal's family and Mookie and his sister's interaction with that family, we do get to see them more as human beings in these moments. But there are moments when they're out on the street interacting with other groups that we do see more of that stereotypical kind of flavor. So I wonder if he was trying to say, yes, here's how everybody kind of views each other at face value, but we're also going to take you inside to when they're just sitting down in a booth and trying to relate to each other. The funny thing is I was looking on YouTube for the trailer for this movie to include in the podcast, and I saw film clips, and one of them was that the sequence of everybody just like yelling racial slurs at the camera. Like, how is this allowed on YouTube? I know it's part of a historical, a big movie and everything, but like, wow, talk about a trigger warning.
You could say that about a lot of things in YouTube.
That's true too.
Yeah. I mean, I think I like that kind of interrupted montage thing because that it kind of shows up in different ways. Like the Spike kind of breaks the movie up a little bit. You could easily say, okay, where's the story in this movie? Because we're just following characters, we're just following street life, and I don't care that there's not like necessarily a straightforward narrative. It doesn't bother me at all. I love these kind of slice of life movies where we're just getting to know the people. But that whole racial slur montage thing, it reminded me of like Spike might be saying, like how you just said Spike likes to put things in your face. he's probably thinking, okay, you viewers, probably a lot of you viewers are thinking this, and so we're just gonna maybe go into your head, and this is probably what you think of these people. This is probably something you have said or have heard, maybe from your family or friends or whatever. Um, and it's an interesting thing, and it's one of the other elements of the movie that plays out like a play. But I think that's where the movie kind of has its hot moments. That's another hot moment in a hot summer day where the tempers are flaring. I really liked I really liked how all that was portrayed. I think it's like EMan was saying, it is in your face, but I looked at this as kind of like almost emphasized drama. It's kind of, it's not necessarily, I guess I'll go back to that word, fable. It plays out like a fable. It's maybe some of the characters are maybe overemphasized in a way, and not necessarily stereotyped, but maybe emphasized. And Spike kind of drives certain characters home a little bit more. They're big characters, and there's not a whole lot of like subtlety to the portrayal, although there are nuances. And it really makes you think, like, okay, what could have happened? What could have changed here for this whole scenario to not unravel the way it did? What should Sal have put up a couple pictures of, Michael Jordan or Eddie Murphy or something, or Prince? It's an Italian place. I don't know. It's like
you got more walls.
You got more walls.
You got more walls.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like you've been around for 25 years.
Yeah.
Your customers are mainly black. What is the obviously you're gonna have Frank Sinatra and John Travolta and Perry Como up there, but like, who's that for? It's just for you and you and your sons, okay? But what about the neighborhood you're in? But then again, are you gonna walk into
like a Chinese spot?
You're gonna walk into a J and J. Are you gonna walk into a J and J's, or a barbecue place on the south side and say, hey man, why isn't there a picture of Robert Redford up here or something? It's like, what? Random white guy. But it's like, I understand where I'm at, and so it. But the thing is that's a little different, because here's an Italian American place on a black street, and I think it, like Ian was saying, it's kind of, you see these generational differences, and maybe for a long time people just been like, whatever. I don't even notice these guys on the wall. It's just an Italian place where I like to sit and chill out and get some AC and get my pizza, and I'm out of here. But then all of a sudden this generation was like, you know what are these people staring at me from the wall? I don't even know them. What? It's a bunch of white people. I get that. But I think that there's just these extreme reactions also too, that just, it's not, there's a lot more going on underneath it all, and then it comes out in their actions.
And I think the interesting thing is, like, when you look at Sal and Mookie's final confrontation,
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, from the beginning of the movie to that very point, there's always been that elephant in the room. And that's what I think they keep trying to avoid by sitting here talking about, no, I want my money,
Mm-hmm.
no, you take it, no, you take it. Like, the whole time I'm sitting here thinking, like, you guys are really avoiding trying to talk about the real issues that led to all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and no one knows how to encounter it. No one knows how to have that real honest conversation,
Right.
especially when
Correct.
it comes to race. The closest you got was when Mookie was talking to, what was it, Pino?
With Pino, yeah. At the
Yeah, that
yeah.
was the closest we got to it. As like, hey, you have all these favorite people
Mm-hmm.
that happen to be black that you like, but yet you're all like tearing them down and everything. Like, but even that conversation doesn't really go the distance that it needed to
Yeah.
come to some sort of, I don't want to say come to Jesus moment, but to come to some sort of understanding
Right.
of this is why I feel this way, or this is why I act this way, and so on and so forth. But I do think that is also indicative of American society. We've always danced around the issue of race.
Mm-hmm.
We know it's there. We don't like it. We get uncomfortable by it. We avoid it. Then we get conflicted with it. And it's like this dance that we just keep on going to until something, no pun intended, blows up.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was an interesting push and pull that kept happening through the different character dynamics. And yeah, we don't really have a resolution to it because, well, we don't have one in this country yet. So why would you figure that out?
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there was that great exchange between Pino and Mookie that even though it ended, not in a very positive way, where he says, fuck you and fuck Michael Jackson, which it's sort of like a weird punchline, but it is, you get the feeling that it is, the first time they've really had a conversation about that. If nothing else, maybe it planted a seed in Pino to think about, well, maybe I do really like Prince, that kind of a thing. And why don't I put that more front and center in my life? Unfortunately, given the events that happen, 6 hours later, he's not going to be looking back on that conversation. He's probably going to block it out and just think, nothing but hateful things. And, so that confirmation bias of like, well, this is what happens when you let your guard down. But the one thing that struck me really was the odd sub-theme of manners in this film and how important that is in terms of human dignity, because you look at a couple of the three really big incidents that kind of set off set pieces in this film. You've got Bugging Out sitting down, having his pizza, looking up at the Wall of Fame. It's the first time that he's ever really noticed that there's just white people up on the wall. And he immediately launches into Sal saying, why don't you have any brothers up on the wall? And Sal says, you want brothers up on the wall, you open your own place, you do what you want to do, which is, a perfectly respectable answer. Mm-hmm. It's kind of flippant, and it doesn't really show a whole lot of, regard. It's almost like maybe he's been asked that question before. He's tired of talking about it. But Bugging Out's response, he just immediately flies off the handle, and his first response is to organize a boycott. The next example, I'm getting to what this example about manners is, but I want to outline the three kind of jumping off points. The next one is when Frank Vincent, who plays this older Italian guy who's driving his classic Cadillac through the neighborhood as the kids have set off, they've opened up the fire hydrants and are kind of spraying each other and having a big block party. He tries to drive his car through, and he's like, "You guys better not spray this car. It's a classic," and all this stuff. Like, yeah, it's an antique. Okay, sure, go on through. And immediately he gets hosed. The last example is Bugging Out and Radio Raheem are talking in the alley about how Radio Raheem got kicked out of Sal's Famous or something, or Sal told him, turn down the radio. Right. And then he says, and this is my entire point, he says, motherfucker didn't even say please. It occurs to me, if anybody in any of these interactions, regardless of their race or whatever, had just said, hey, Sal, I just noticed you have a bunch of Italians up on the wall. What would you think about, maybe having some other types of people on the wall? Hey, guys, I've got this car, it's awesome you're having fun, but can I just please get through? Or, hey, maybe I see there's a party going on, I'm going to back up and go around the block. Or, but then again, Sal didn't say, "Hey, Radio Raheem, could you please turn that down? Just while you're in here, I can't hear myself think. It's hot enough, whatever." I'm not saying manners is the cure to racism. I'm just saying that Spike Lee sort of seemed like he was trying to say one of the big problems we have is we don't deal with each other with a mutual level playing field of respect. Even if we don't think we're going to get it, we have to at least start out so we can have some kind of a moral high ground moving forward.
So a little civility can go a long way.
Yeah. And
that's the concise way of saying my exactly rambling nonsense. Yes.
I mean, I think that it's what you're asking for is great, but it's also unrealistic. It's not that these guys would not go there. I mean, you see a guy, some old Goomba coming down in his antique car in a black neighborhood. What are these guys going to think? Oh, we don't care about this guy. Oh, watch, we'll get him. We're going to get him wet. It's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. You know, and then it happens. So it's like they're already kind of have their predispositions about how they feel about one another. You know, so they already have a judgment on who the other person is. You know, and with bugging out, I mean, that's the name of his character. That's how he responds to things. He's bugging out. You know, it's like that's pretty obvious right there. But it's like the way he responds is just like he goes from, you know, 0 to 60 like that. You know, it's just like, hey, what's going on here? You know, and it's like, of course, Sal's gonna be like, dude, come on, man. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Radio Raheem is like, he is, you know, the soundtrack of the neighborhood. He's always playing Public Enemy, and he never turns that thing down. He even had the showdown with the Puerto Ricans there. It's like they wanted to listen to their salsa. No, he's got the bigger speakers, everything. He's going to win wherever he goes. That's his soundtrack. And I don't know. It's like, even if Sal would have said please, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't know if that would have even registered or worked.
I think what ended up happening is, you know, and maybe I'm overreading into what Spike was trying to do or not, but I think we get so, I mean, with all these characters being overcharged as stereotypes, we see the stereotypes and not the person.
Sure.
And when we don't see the person, we don't take the time to actually think about, like, oh, hey, let me treat you civilly, because I'm so busy almost distracted with all these external things that do fuel my, you know, predisposed biases. You know, I mean, the guy running in the vintage car, in the old car, he didn't see kids on a hot summer day just having fun. He didn't see that. He saw a bunch of hoodlums doing chaos, and he was more concerned about his property than, you know, just people being people. Even for Sal, like, a lot of people only viewed Sal for his food. You know, like when it was closing time, and, you know, they were like, "Oh, we need Sal's food." Like they wanted that food, and it's like nobody's really sitting here thinking about Sal the person, you know. And even for bugging out, I think he was representative of kind of like different types of characters who, I don't want to say get radicalized, because they didn't really give us a lot of his background to know that. But just the fact that he was quick to look for an issue to jump on and to amplify, that to me was kind of like, that's his shtick. But you don't get that shtick unless you've been, you know, indoctrinated in other stuff. Maybe he's been looking and listening to a lot of Stokely Carmichael or Huey Newton, or, you know, just you know, other voices, you know, that could have been really fueling him, so that if anything happens in a society, it's an automatic trigger. You know, it's an automatic, like, oh, look at this picture, boycott.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty drastic thing to just jump to for that.
Now, and he's prowling the streets trying to instigate and trying to corral other people. And there's even that conversation that he has with the one of the girls who lived there on the street, and she's like, why don't you just find something more constructive to do to support the community? And it's like, come on, man. It's like, it's Sal, it's pizza. It's like, move on, come on.
And
I get what you guys are saying, but I'm thinking that, this is what I picked up on was that Spike Lee was insinuating that even though these are stereotypical characters, and perhaps we view a lot of people in our regular lives as, stereotypes or at arm's length, because we don't sit down and have a cup of coffee with everybody that we look at on the street. But just to say that, yes, you may have this reaction, you may have assumptions about what people are thinking based on what they're doing or who you think that they are, but one of the best ways to at least get off on the right foot is to just engage with them as if you would like a person that you consider, dignified or respectable. David, when you were saying that, yeah, it's this old Italian guy who's driving his car in the street and he sees a bunch of kids, playing in the street, he thinks they're hoodlums. We have no way of thinking that. He could just be this grumpy old guy who sees people messing around and then, he's just like yelling at them. We don't know if he doesn't like them because they're black or if it's just because they're playing around with the water and he's to get his car through. But he does, he takes the path of most resistance. And it's entirely possible if he said, hey, kids, could you please, just pause it for a second? They could have very much yelled at him and said, fuck
Screw you,
turn around and go away, or aimed the water at him right then and there. But, we'll never know. And that's sort of the tragic lesson is nobody in this movie, except for, maybe DeMea, had that kind of like, I guess, age-old wisdom of of saying, this is all nuts. One thing I actually want to get to that seemed like a contradiction, and this is the first time I picked up on it, but Mother's sister, played by the great Ruby Dee, at the end of the film, when Sal's first gets lit on fire, it cuts to her yelling, "Burn it down, burn it down."
Yeah.
I saw that.
At the end,
she's like, no!
Yeah, the last scene, she's sitting there screaming, and it seemed like a complete, almost like Spike Lee decided to make an edit but forgot to make that edit. Like, I'm going to have one where she's upset and one where she's encouraging it. Right. That's obviously not true because they're both in there, but what was your interpretation of that? Which one is the real emotion? Or are they both real? And just, is there some context I'm missing?
I mean, okay, so one, I thought it was a mistake too. Like, that was my first impression because I'm like, what? What are you doing, lady? Like, but if I'm giving Spike the benefit of the doubt, and if I'm going to try and, take it as though this was all intentional, I start thinking about the complex emotions that are processed during a riot. Because a riot is a purely emotional event. It's not based on logic. So, when people are criticizing rioters, or looters for destroying their own cities or their own homes, they're not also taking into account that this is a reaction, an emotional reaction, which, by the way, is usually counterintuitive, or it's just not logical, but that doesn't mean that the emotion is unjustified. That doesn't get rid of the legitimacy of the emotion. And I think what was happening, at least with her character, was she felt that immediate emotion of burn it all down, like, stick it to the man or whatever. But then it's like, but I like that pizza.
I think it's also I like that neighborhood. It's and I like my street. Look what's happening to my street. Yeah, I think the no was crying out more of like the chaos and the upheaval of the neighborhood being turned upside down. I think that's maybe she was saying no to herself too. It's like I shouldn't have been a part of this. I shouldn't have supported this. Look what's happened. And I actually, when I watched it again tonight, I'm like, are we gonna cut to something she's actually seeing, or what is she saying no about? Right. But then when you when you think about it, it could have been just like this emotional reaction of like, no, why is this happening? Why I didn't
And
think that it would come to this.
how often is it that when we get upset about something and it feels right in that moment, but then after a while we're like, oh, why
Yeah.
did I say that?
Right.
Yeah.
Why did I throw that
Mhm.
glass against
Mhm.
the door? So I think that was what happened.
It could have been, just not the fault, but just the result of, the ride is like maybe 10 minutes. It seems like a condensed amount of time. Like we're not really watching things in real time. So maybe some time had passed. I don't know. It's a weird thing, to be sure. And I think both of your explanations are valid. One thing I wanted to ask is when Mookie throws the garbage can, does he say hey or does he say hate?
He said, "Hey, I always watch with subtitles, and I watched
Okay.
it today. It was Hey, Hey."
Okay.
I think he was just trying to get people's attention, and he didn't do the right thing. To answer your question, you know, uh, and that's a quote. That's all comes from Malcolm X. But yeah, I mean, I think that I'm sure he was just trying to get everybody's attention, and that was just like he had it. But it was just that was another thing that he just kind of lit the fire by throwing that through the window. Yeah, it's interesting how when I watched it again, I was like, it was Ozzie Davis's character, the mayor, who kind of corralled the three Italian guys and pushed them aside, and even like kind of closed the gate behind them from a local brownstone. Um, that was interesting to me. It's like, you guys, I'm gonna take you out of this, and because there's really nothing you could do. You're outnumbered. It's chaos. Yeah.
And I wondered about because they were able to see their building being destroyed from their vantage point.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me that nobody really went and attacked them during the riot portion of it. I mean, they got roughed up, as they spilled out onto the street, from the initial
Right.
encounter. But they were kind of safe over in that area. I just don't know if people were so focused on tearing the building apart that they didn't notice these guys were across the street or what the deal was. But yeah, it always was kind of a puzzlement that they, nobody thought to do anything more to them. Not that I wanted to see that, obviously, but
I don't think they even saw him.
No, I think the anger just shifted, because at first it was, okay, screw you, Sal, and whatever. But then when the police got involved, then it was like, and you can hear it in the dialogue, like the anger and the focus just started to shift on those external things. Oh man, the police are always screwing us up. Oh man, like the world just sucks. Like it became an overwhelming thing that it no longer was about just that small specific situation with Sal. It was like, here's this culmination point of black frustration, and we're just going to, release it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real quick. Have you guys seen Malcolm X?
Long time ago. Yeah.
I have never seen that one all the way through, and I started watching it a little bit today, just like the opening, like 10 minutes, and I'm like, man, and again, it's one of those things like, I don't know why I didn't see this, but I have to see it. Looking forward to watching it.
I was thinking maybe at some point, probably soon, we should, if you're up for it, watch it and talk about it, because that seemed to be the continuation of a lot of these ideas he was talking about in this film, but which took place, 30 years or so before Do the Right Thing took place. So, yeah, I mean, we could probably talk forever about the ways that this correlates directly to the events happening today and what it all means, quote unquote. But I think we'll just kind of leave it here at the movie review. Do you have any closing thoughts on Do the Right Thing, even if it's to talk about how it ties into what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, like you said, that's another hour. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be great if this was kind of required viewing in, maybe it's a cliche to say, oh, this should be required viewing or viewing in schools, but it is a good source of discussion. I mean, it's always going to be a topic, and it's a deliberate movie. It's a movie that looks at these stereotypes and makes us look at them and how we viewed these types of people. And I think that it's probably one of Lee's best movies in a way, because it leaves viewers with such ripe discussions afterwards. Like, wow. I think I'd like to go back and read some of the initial reviews from '89 and see what people thought of the movie, and maybe even some interviews and stuff. A lot of people say that it's his best movie, and a lot of people champion it and everything, and I do consider it kind of like a classic, kind of milestone in his filmography. But I'd be curious to think, just to hear what some of the initial reactions were back in '89. Yeah.
I agree with David that I think this is a movie that needs to be watched with an immediate follow-up conversation. I wouldn't, like, if you're new to racism or social justice.
If you're new to racism,
if you just landed on this planet,
right.
Racism for dummies.
If you're trying to start your intellectual quest, trying to understand all this wouldn't be the very first movie I'd be like, watch this and you'll get it. Because of the ambiguity that it does, leave. It absolutely does require that extra discussion. And I mean, that's, I'm working on a project now on another video for recommendations, in terms of, hey, engage with these films or content to help broaden your understanding of like systematic racism and, like in film or just in society, and things that'll just be a little bit more edifying. But this wouldn't make the list, just because it needs that extra layer of, let's work through this, let's chug through this, and because there are a lot of things at play here. But overall, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely a Spike Lee joint. It's absolutely something that will be at the top of his list, of recommendations for people to watch if you're a fan of his work. But yeah, there's still a lot to deal with and process with, especially in these times now, given the current events. Maybe if we get to the point where things calm down a little bit, it's a different story. But as of right now, it's a lot. So yeah, we need the warnings and stuff in there, that you were talking about, Ian.
Yeah. Well, to end things on a positive note, we kind of talked about this before we jumped on the show or started recording. EMan, today, or actually last night, I saw it today. You put out a fantastic Facebook video about your encounter with the police. And when I first saw it, and I think you kind of opened the video, you looked like you were walking through your house and you kind of had this somber expression, and the title was like, "My Encounter with the Police." So like, oh shit, what happened? But not to spoil it, and I don't know, are you going to put that up on YouTube, or is it strictly on your Facebook? Or
I don't know. I mean,
I know it's a personal thing, but it's just one of those things. I'm like, everybody should see this. So
I might put it on like Twitter or something, or maybe on Instagram. I'll think about the YouTube one. I'll think about it.
It's a great I think, coda to our Do the Right Thing discussion and to the news and everything going on. It's a hopeful story. It's also a very funny one. So yeah, whenever you get that up, please let me know and I'll tweet it out and all that good stuff. But thank you again for posting. That was awesome. So I think we'll close that out here. I've certainly rambled enough. Emmanuel Noisette from EMan's Movie Reviews, David Fowlie from Keeping It Real. Don Shanahan was going to join us tonight, but he wasn't able to make it. But he will be joining us back here for the Friday discussion of Da 5 Bloods, which is the new Spike Lee film coming out this week on Netflix. So that'll be exciting, and probably a lot more stuff to talk about because we have a whole nother week before that movie drops. And
a lot can happen in a week.
And definitely keep an eye out for my interview with Spike about that.
You're kidding
movie.
me.
Yeah.
Has it happened? It's happened
It
already?
has happened. It has happened. I'm waiting for the video to drop, but I already got the quote I need to post. But I'll just, as a fun little teaser, I'll just say I asked Spike the question of the 5 Bloods is about Spike, it's him depicting Black veterans fighting in the Vietnam War, or the American War, and just that complicated relationship between being Black, being a veteran, patriotism, and so on and so forth. And I asked him about his thoughts on Drew Brees and his comments, because he invoked his grandparents who fought for the war and said that the protests, taking a knee was disrespectful to the flag and all that. And Spike had a very interesting answer. So stay tuned.
I look forward to that. How are you going to drop that on your own?
I'll drop it everywhere. You'll see it.
Okay, all right.
No way you won't see it. I'll drop it.
And it was like video?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, cool.
It was video, but I'll have it also written out and everything too. But yeah, you'll get the whole shebang.
Cool, man.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I know you've been doing a lot of great high profile interviews. It's through the African American Film Critics Association. Is that right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, man. Well, is that going to be out by Friday?
I hope so.
Okay.
I'm waiting for them to drop the video. I'm like, guys, let's go. So
yeah.
Right.
All right.
Checking this down. I'll let you know.
Cool,
well,
man.
if it's up by the time this goes up, or the 5 Bloods episode, I'll definitely leave a link in the description, all that good stuff. So for now, thank you very much, guys, for talking about this film. We'll be talking about another Spike Lee movie soon, and maybe even another one after that. So I appreciate you taking the time and really being candid about your feelings. We need more dialogue like this as we try and process everything as a country. So thanks, and have a great night.
See you guys later.
All right.